Okay, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Personnel Board meeting for February 16th, third Wednesday of the month. Amy, do you want to take the reins?
Sure. All right. Hi, everyone. Happy February. Glad you could all make it today. I sent out an email, if you haven't been on yet this morning, it was an hour or so ago, with all the documents. You had them all already, I think, but just wanted to put them all in one place so it would be easy to refer to them. I put them in our Dropbox folder as well. So Chief Hawk has already called the meeting to order. So our next order of business is to look at our minutes from the January meeting. And I think I said this before, I have everything on my home computer. So if someone wants to pull up the minutes, great. If not,
I can share the screen, Amy, if you'd like me to.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Give me a moment to get them off of your email.
Okay. I looked through them. I think everything was captured, but any comments or questions or changes for the minutes from January?
Everybody see that as it come through to everybody?
Yep, got it. The only thing I noticed here, Bob, you were going to check. I had emailed you right after the meeting. I think you were unable to join last time. You were going to check and make sure I didn't need to, well, the chairperson doesn't need to sign the minutes. We struck that from the ordinance that has already been presented to council. So I'm hoping that's the case. I just wanted to confirm that.
Yeah, I think you're fine with that.
Okay.
Right. That cleans it up.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Any other comments on the meeting minutes from January? Okay. Do we have a motion to approve?
I motion to approve it.
All right. Second.
Seconded.
All right. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? No one's opposed. Okay. Moving along then. Next order of business for the agenda was an update from Bob or Chief Hawk on the ordinance that we had put forward and where we are with the hiring process timeline.
Council has received that and we're moving forward on the advertising for that. I believe that we intend to put that on the February 28th agenda for adoption. So we're just waiting on any kind of feedback from council. But so far I've not heard anything from them. They received it late last week.
Okay. So we do not, based on your comment of we're going ahead and advertising the position, we don't necessarily need to wait for council to approve the changes before we advertise the position. Is that true?
I would wait because the qualifications change. I would wait until they approve it, at least on the 28th, and then start to move forward with the advertising.
Okay. Okay. Got it. This wasn't on the agenda, but I just thought about it and I don't want to forget it. On Monday evening at the council meeting, the group discussed potentially increasing the number of members on this board. So I believe the proposal was from 3 members to 5 members and that the terms would be 5 years each. And there were some comments made by council members that they thought 5 years was too long. And so they were going to have Steve Corbell go back and rewrite that to be 3 years, I think is what I recall. Is that Chief Hawk, what you? Yeah. Oh, Bob. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So that will then, as I understand, have to be put forward for public comment. And would that be on the 28th as well, Bob?
No, we can't meet the advertising requirements for the hearing because of the nature of the ordinance that we'd hold a hearing on. So we would hold the public hearing on March 14th and take action on the 28th to update.
March 28th. Okay. Okay, so I think if that passes on March 28th, there would be 3 positions open. My position, which is still technically open, as well as the 2 additional. And then those positions would be staggered. Matt S., I think yours ends end of this year, if I'm right. Or maybe it was Brian's.
I thought mine was the one that ends this year.
I was just going to say maybe it was the opposite. So Brian's ends December 2022 and Matt ends December 2023. Mine technically ended the December of 2021. So the new positions, I'm not sure exactly how that would work, but they would be staggered so that they wouldn't both end at once. And for the 3-year terms, again, assuming if that passes on the 28th. But if you have thoughts about that, I just wanted to mention there is a public comment session on the 14th.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments, conversation about that?
I think excuse me, the intent will be that if I understood Steve Corbell's comment, we will have 2 members appointed in 1 year, 2 members another year, and then 1 member the 3rd year in order to stagger the overall terms. So I'm not entirely sure how like Amy, your current position, how that fits in with the 2 additional ones that we'll hire or we'll appoint. It'll just be a matter of over the course of the next couple of years, making those adjustments so that we have that correct moving forward. So there may be some reduced terms in there. I haven't sorted that out with the current dynamic with Steve, but we'll have that sorted out for the public hearing.
Okay, sounds good. And then we would, well, Carolyn and someone, I guess, not me, would then interview for those positions. And we could potentially, I think, because we've done this before, use the already recorded interviews from previous interview sessions. Is that accurate?
I mean, that's a discussion that the council can have, how they want to handle that.
Yeah, I'll have to discuss that with council to see, if we just redo everything, what they prefer to do.
Okay. All right. Sounds good.
Amy, quick question.
Yeah.
Well, 2 quick questions. What's the reason for adding 5 or adding 2 more? And then if we do add 2 more, do we need 2 alternates? Because now you'll have a majority vote on issues. Or
It's a good
we
question.
could eliminate the 2 alternates and just go with 5. And what's the reasoning for having 5 full-time board members or permanent board members?
I know from council, just conversation, I've not heard of anyone mentioning to eliminate the alternates. I think it's a huge benefit to have 5 full-time. The 2 alternates, don't we have some committees and stuff that do have 7 people on them? I know this is a little bit different, but I can ask them if they'd want to eliminate the alternate positions, but I almost think it's a benefit to still have the 2 alternates to be able to fill in when, or if someone's not available to be, part of the meetings.
Honestly, I've always thought the role of the alternates is a little confusing because even if someone's not here, they're not voting members. So I think it would be easier and cleaner to have 5 full-time members without the alternates. However, if we changed it so that, for example, if someone were to resign like Chaz did, the alternate would then become a full-time member. I think that would make a lot of sense if our alternates are like members in waiting. But the way it is now, with the alternates having to interview and like, it's sort of like, why do we have that role? What's the purpose if not to become full-time members? So those are my thoughts.
If I could speak to that, Amy, I think if we have a meeting with 3 members now, 2 attend and the 3rd member can't make it for some reason, and an alternate's here, then an alternate does become a voting member in order to get the quorum for that meeting. And then the next meeting, when there's the full membership back, if we go to 5 and we don't have alternates and 1 member doesn't show up, you're going to have tie votes.
Unless you keep the quorum at 3.
And I guess I didn't realize that, Matt, that the alternates can vote if someone doesn't attend. So then what happens? Let's say I don't attend and Brian and Matt are here and Matt and Mark are the alternates. Who gets to be the voting member? Like, how? We've never really run into that. So there's a lot of.
We've never discussed that part of how all the logistics would work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think when we had that issue when Chaz dropped off the board, I ended up stepping in because the members that were left voted on it between. So that's how it happened in the past. So I don't know if that's actually hard written anywhere.
It might be good to kind of clarify as we're going through this process to. I'm not sure how other committees do it. Falco, I know you sent yesterday or the day before a draft of the rules you wanted to see us sort of mirror. I haven't had a chance to really look at that.
Yeah, not necessarily mirror, but just use as kind of the base document for discussions. But yes, I was just about to say that can be addressed in those internal rules in terms of which alternate would then step in to fill that spot for that meeting. I think the ordinance is silent on that, although I do agree with the previous description that an alternate would fill that empty spot for that meeting. And just like we did for the hearing that we had recently, once an alternate became part of that process because they had participated in the interviews for the sergeant, they would then continue to address any issues arising from that. And I think that is spelled out in the ordinance. But the actual selection of which of the 2 would sit in for that particular meeting, that could be addressed through the internal operating procedures.
Yeah. Is that something that, hearing the discussion here, and I'm not assuming everyone agrees with me, but if people agree that those are kind of things that make sense to have the alternate step in the event of a vacancy during a meeting, or an absence rather during a meeting, maybe we say the most tenured alternate available should be the voting member for that meeting, and to have the alternate step in the event of a vacancy in the board if someone were to resign. Are those things that make sense to everyone else? Do we want
to? As long as Matt Lucas is more tenured than me, I'm perfectly. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the case.
I can step down for a little bit if you want, Mark.
No.
Yeah, there's a
That's
lot
right.
of ambiguity in this. Because it says, 2 members constitute a quorum. So I don't know. I mean, so I'm just not sure. I mean, it's always about the unintended consequences, right? I mean, you start kind of, because there's an ability of 2 members to call a meeting. It all seems a little bit complex at this point without the specific anticipated changes to the membership to make it a 5-person board. So, I mean, it seems like something that we could consider when that happens.
Just a thought here, Amy. I'm not trying to look at our current, well, anyway, I won't go there. But maybe you as the chairwoman or anybody as the chairwoman can make if the group decides or the council decides to go to 5 members and there's one person down and it's a 2-2 vote, maybe you or whoever's holding your position at that time cast the deciding vote. I don't know if that's possible. I'm not a lawyer. There's at least one on the phone, so.
So in that situation, Amy would be voting twice?
Well, she would cast the deciding vote, I guess. I mean, I guess the answer would be yes to your question, but how else do you resolve this? You know, if you have 5 and only 4 show up, unless you just table the vote for the next council meeting, or the next board meeting, which would take a month, and just kicks the can down the road. But
Yeah, my impression was a tie. On a tie, the motion fails, right? I mean, that's
right.
That's just how the rules of order work.
Okay.
Right.
And in that scenario, Mark, so you're saying if the 5 regular members, one cannot attend, so then there's 4, and there's no alternates who could step into that 5th place.
Well, I was assuming the alternates would be eliminated and we would just go to a 5. And maybe, and again, I'm still learning about how the government works here, guys. I'm not going to try to, fool anybody here. So maybe it defers to Carol, or somebody else to make it cast a deciding vote. I don't know.
I don't think I can. I'm just.
Carolyn isn't a voting member.
You have to be appointed by all council to be able to do that.
Well,
Right.
so Mark raises a good point. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Falco.
No, I don't know who was speaking earlier, but the normal rules of order, or probably Robert's rules of order, would say that that motion fails. And it's not unusual that happens in local government, because you do have councils and other bodies, if somebody's absent, might have a tie vote. So you either have to convince those present to possibly change a vote, or you have to take action at another meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, you couldn't have somebody who's not actually appointed to the board cast the vote.
Mark's scenario raises a good question. How do we feel about, let's assume that council approves the 5 members. How do we feel about retaining 5 members plus 2 alternates? I mean, honestly, that's where I'm leaning, but like to hear from everyone else. Is that?
Yeah, that would be my preference.
I'm not sure that you would actually need 2 alternates. You only may need 1.
That's fine too.
Because zoning hearing boards are normally the only other entity that I've encountered that have alternates because of the nature of their work, which isn't dissimilar to some of the actions that you guys have to take. And they simply step in and do the same thing. They follow through on a vote when they have to step in. By and large, their actions are sort of a one and done, one meeting and then they're done. But I don't necessarily believe that you would need more than 1 alternate if you're going to have 5 members.
I guess the other question is, do we decide how many members there are, or does council decide?
Council decides this.
Yeah.
But in the
So-
end, it's kind of like we just have to wait and see what council says, because
Yeah, it's not our call.
we really can't. We're just, kind of wasting time trying to predict what 7 members will want.
Well, and I think, yes, we don't decide. However, I think council might be interested to hear our perspective and opinions on how it might work best. And if there are in fact 5 members, there still exists a lot of ambiguity around how those members operate and how the alternates operate. So if we have the opportunity to clear up, ambiguity is never good when it comes to governance procedures. So some of those things that I mentioned about, when the alternate votes, we have to change verbiage in the current ordinance about what a quorum consists of. Some of the things about, again, the ordinance is currently silent, but why don't we spell out that a alternate, if we have one or two, would be a voting member, and what happens in the event of a vacancy. I just think it would help to clarify some of those things. But what I hear you saying, Caroline, is maybe we wait until council decides on how many members, and then we go back and say, okay, based on this, these 3 or 4 things need clarification.
I
And
I
can
would
agree with that
encourage
too.
you to make your comments either via email or at the public hearing on the 14th.
Yeah, to council.
It is important that council has all of that perspective when they're voting.
Mhm.
Is it possible, though, to have them vote on the rest of this stuff at once instead of them voting on the number of members on the 14th and then, or I'm sorry, the 28th of March, and then waiting another month or 2 to vote on how it all impacts what we have written now? Or, I mean, could Falco propose?
Yeah,
Sorry,
I think we could do that. We can have those run simultaneously.
It would make the public comment a little more concrete because you're actually commenting on a specific draft of the ordinance.
right. And that was my point of talking about it here, just to have some kind of direction to go with what that would look like. So Caroline, I don't want to overstep, being that we're not
No,
the
it's okay.
decision makers.
I'm just typing up notes right now, so I can, when this comes up, we can discuss this with council. So
Is there a discussion planned before the 14th?
At this point, there isn't. Frankly, I was surprised at the fact that the council didn't take action on the ordinance to, create 5 positions in the personal board the other night. I expected that to occur, and I didn't expect to be going back through another hearing process. That being said, I think now if we take the information that Falco sent out this week and have that run simultaneously with the ordinance for the increase in the number of members, that would make sense. So I think if you have any comments on that, we should get those finalized into the town council as quickly as we can.
Yeah, and just for the sake of clarity, what Falco sent out this week is not going to accomplish what I was saying we would need if the council votes on 5 members, all the repercussions of the changes to our ordinance. So it would be a separate work set for Falco to draft that before the 14th or before the 28th. So I don't think I have the authority to raise Falco's hand to volunteer or for the town to pay him for his time. But that's, to me, that would make sense to have everything, I think as Brian or maybe Bob said, have everything all packaged together to say, okay, if council votes on 5 members, here's the repercussions of that. This, and this would have to be updated and changed. And here's a draft of what that would look like in the ordinance.
I was going to say the same thing.
Yeah, definitely the change from 3 to 5 and whether there would or would not be alternates is an ordinance issue that would have to be taken through the ordinance. How the alternates do survive, how the alternates then fill in on a particular meeting, that could be done through those internal procedures. Remember though, Bob, those internal procedures that I sent out this week are very preliminary draft, and it does not address a lot of the issues that we've been discussing, but it just kind of serves to begin that process. So it would take a lot of work to have that document ready for final approval by next month.
If that's the case, would we want to delay any action on increasing the number of members? I mean, I hate to keep this dragging out.
Well, but I mean,
Yeah,
I think, isn't it the case that the public hearing is just on increasing it to 5, not the gory
Yes.
details, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
that's the only thing that would include, I think.
Yeah, and whether the alternates then continue or not. I think those two issues are definitely ordinance issues that town council would have to take action on. Depending on what then the outcome of that is, whether there are or are not alternates, that would then become part of the internal process in terms of how those alternates would be used.
what's
I
the
don't
path
think
of
it
least
should delay
resistance though,
council.
right? If we just say, we're going to do 5 instead of 3, that's one public hearing. Let's assume the alternates are going to continue. There is a concept of, alternates that still exists. That only requires one public hearing. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, except what I heard Falco say is if we wish to have the alternates become full-time members in the event of a vacancy, that would also require a public hearing. Is that true?
No, I don't
Yeah.
believe that would. That's
Okay.
procedural. It would be a resolution of the council. Oh, an adjustment to the board appointment policy, really. So that would need to be discussed because currently the policy is that, everyone goes through that interview process, that there's nothing that was automatic. And I'm sorry, my other meeting is calling in, so I have to jump off. Sorry.
Okay.
Thanks, Bob.
All right. So where does that leave?
But I mean, it sounds like the fastest, sort of least burdensome approach is to just, continue with the hearing process for the 5, and then the rest of that stuff just comes out in the wash afterwards. It's all valid stuff, and we just don't have to worry about it now.
Yeah. But we do have to worry about it at some point because then if council approves 5 members, all the rest of the things in the ordinance have to be updated. So I would think
Yeah,
that
it's
would
the
be
next
something-
thing. It's the next task.
Yeah. Okay. But not our task. So
And it's also not, it doesn't, need to have a hearing. That's the thing that will delay it if that was the case.
okay.
I think there's going to be time for it anyways, because there's not magically going to be 5 members all of a sudden. There won't be 2 appointments out of the blue. I don't think that's going to take time as well.
Right. True. Okay. All right. Sorry. Didn't mean to derail our agenda today, but I wanted to get people's input and perspective on that since we are the current board and it certainly affects our future, how we work together. So, Chief Hawk, one more agenda item that actually isn't on the agenda because I didn't think to add it. Are we all set with the sergeant promotion? Has that happened? Is he sworn in? Is that everything good to go there?
So yes, the short answer is yes, Amy. He was sworn in. It's probably been at least a couple weeks, maybe a couple weeks ago is what Carolyn's reminded me. So yes, that process, I believe, congratulations to you guys for seeing it through. And we have a final product. We have a sergeant on the street now, and he's covering shifts. And I'm excited because it's more shifts that we have a supervisor on as opposed to an officer in charge for the shift. And I think he's already paying dividends, looking at policies and such, and going to help me with one example is less lethal shotguns. We're trying to implement those and get rid of the real, the lethal shotguns out of the patrol cars, have another less lethal force option. He's spearheading that. He's going to be the trainer. but yeah, the short answer is there is a new sergeant on the road. And, you know, folks, if we need to, there's a chance at the end of the year, we will need another one. Sergeant Madden, our canine sergeant, I'm afraid we're going to lose him by the end of the year to retirement. And there's potential if council and, you know, town management are on board with it to promote another one off that list. And I think there are some quality candidates still at the top of that list.
Yeah,
Mhm.
great. So glad to hear he's running his platoon and everything's up and running. How's the department handling the change? You know, there's always change, but everyone okay with?
Near as
mean,
I
there's
can
always
tell, I
difficulty
think,
with change.
and I'm sorry to interrupt, Amy, I think
No.
seamless really is a good word so far. You know, it's early, but I believe that the officers are probably, all things considered, this particular officer, I believe, is an unofficial leader, and I think that they're all probably, you know, falling in line at his and under his direction. So,
Good.
Who selected?
Sergeant Ewing.
Richard Ewing, Matt, I don't know if you remember him in the interviews, but Officer Ewing is the one that got promoted.
Okay.
All right. Good. So we can lay that to rest for now. Done. Okay, so let's turn our attention towards the officer selection process in anticipation that we will get to start this soon. I did send out the application. Let me just pull that up. So not that the application is the only thing we need to look at. There's a lot more. However, since it's the first thing, as we post to the position, I guess technically the verbiage of the posting would be the first thing. I don't know how much we need to get involved in that. I know you guys have kind of done that in the past, but we are open to suggestions for how to post it or where to post it, particularly Matt Lucas, if you have ideas for generating additional interest. I know Chief Hawk had some thoughts, Times Square being one of them. But we want to get as many qualified candidates as possible. So Chief Hawk, do you want this group to look at the posting, or is that something you guys have always done in the past on your own?
We could certainly, when we pull one together, maybe I could have Denise pull up a previous one, Amy, if you guys feel it appropriate, and share it with the group. Maybe blast it out in an email. I'm not sure of her status today, if she's here or off sick. But I'm sure we have previous ones that you guys could kind of get an idea of how we've advertised it and throw any, you know, opinion on what we can change, what you like, what you don't, kind of thing.
Okay, that works. I think as long as we reply to you individually, we're not having public discussion. I think that'd be great. I don't know that we'll have major changes, but certainly would appreciate everyone's input.
Certainly the where and how these days, we're open to suggestions, you know, on how to, you know, where to get these, you know, beyond the newspaper or such, where we might have success. And I can touch base with other agencies like Northern Regional. I think they have been hiring. It seems like they hire at least once a year, and what they've found successful and such, I can touch base with their chief.
Okay. Matt L., any thoughts on your end of how to drum up interest?
I think like the chief said, I mean, it's really a process where we recycle how we've been doing it and just continue to do that. New venues, I mean, always like the internet's out there. I think, and chief, I don't know what you think of this, probably most of our applicants are going to be poached from other departments. I don't know that there's going to be a lot of new people that aren't in law enforcement already.
Agreed. Yeah, Matt's right on there. At least historically, that's where it's in McCandless here. I don't think we have but a couple that began their career here. Typically, we get them from the city of Pittsburgh and other agencies where they're just, you know, they like the community. That, you know, perhaps it's a better for their, you know, for them personally. So they'll leave, you know, where they're at and maybe come to a place here in the North Hills.
Are there other factors besides probably a little bit less action in McCandless than there are in the city. Like, for example, do we pay better, or are the benefits better, or what other kinds of draw do we have in terms of why they would want to be in McCandless versus elsewhere?
I think, and Matt could jump into, I believe you touched on, maybe not raising children in the city of Pittsburgh. I know when I left there 19 years ago now, that was the idea, was to come here to a better school district, maybe a bigger yard, it was, and stuff like that, just kind of upgrading your situation. As far as pay goes, I think we're probably ahead of the city of Pittsburgh for sure, but these days, who isn't, as far as the police departments go? I think we're kind of middle of the pack as far as pay. So the draw might be from people who know the area, want to come back to their, to the North Hills. Maybe they're originally from here and such. I think, the training and such, I think we can offer good training, and I think there's probably a variety of factors. Matt, what have you found?
I think it comes down to those things and the reputation of the department. I mean, McCandless has a really good reputation as a place to work and work for. So I think that's what draws in applications.
Well, that's good to hear. I was trying to find in the ordinance, they don't have to live in McCandless, but I can't recall the mileage, the circumference of mileage.
I think it's like 20 miles, right?
So it's a multi-pronged. When I came here, you start at Point State Park and you go north. And as long as you don't cross those rivers, was it the Allegheny on this side? And I forget, is this the Ohio or the Mon? But if you stay in Allegheny County and you don't cross the rivers, you are safe. And then they opened it up and said anywhere in Butler County.
Yeah.
We have an officer that lives in Slippery Rock.
Mhm.
But then a last contract, I don't know how it got thrown in there. I wasn't part of the negotiations, but they got an air mileage as well, where I think it's 20 air miles. So one of our newer hires, for example, he came from the city, and so far he's from the North Allegheny, but he hasn't sold his house yet in Brookline. He lives in Brookline. He's within the 20 air miles, so he's good. So it's a very generous, thank you. Yes. For the officers, very, very forgiving, I guess. When I worked in the city of Pittsburgh, you had to live within the city limits. Now the city has went away from that as well.
Interesting. So I searched the ordinance. It's actually not in our ordinance. It must be part of the contract.
It
then.
is.
It's part of the contract.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Huh. Okay.
No, you know it.
Okay. So sorry, we keep getting off on tangents here. Back to the application. So I don't know if you had a chance to look at that, if folks had a chance to look at that. Just a brief kind of history of this. We, when I joined the personnel board 3+ years ago, there was actually a paper application. So someone from the town a couple of years ago put it into this Word document that is like a fillable Word document. There's probably better ways to do that in terms of like maybe put it on a website, but at the time this was what we thought worked. So we could distribute this. They could still fill it out in paper format if they wanted to, or we could distribute it electronically and they could, sorry, was someone saying something?
Seems like feedback from somewhere.
Mhm.
Oh, okay. So any thoughts on the content of the application? I think a lot of it is probably kind of standard table stakes. You need address, previous employment, social security, all those things to do the background check, military service. It does ask for character references. And then there are some more qualitative kinds of questions like, hold on, let me get to that section. Special licenses, special skills you possess, equipment you can use. There's incidents in your life which may reflect upon your suitability to perform the duties. That one's pretty open-ended. But But for the most part, we're not like trying to pre-screen people based on this application. We're trying to get enough information to see if they pass the background test. And then when they get to the interview process, that's where we have to ask the leadership questions and, the categories that we had talked about previously that I still have in my notes somewhere. We have to develop our questions based on those categories, but I thought we would start here and make sure everyone's comfortable with this first.
And a couple of edits to the essential duties list. More additions than anything. Obviously, those things are necessary.
Okay.
So I have,
What page is that on, Brian?
You have it right there, just on the right, number 12.
Okay. Go ahead.
So I added after dealing with domestic abuse, de-escalation of interpersonal conflicts, just very general. And then I added to, was it communicating effectively with individual suffering from trauma, added physical before trauma, and then added afterwards medical conditions and emotional or psychiatric disorders. So just communicating with people who are in distress in all different ways, not just physical trauma.
Does it say physical?
It didn't say physical, but I think that was implied. Because I mean, like if you have a medical condition, it's not necessarily a trauma. So I didn't think those were implied to be included in trauma. So I just wanted to broaden that a bit.
Yeah, that's an interesting. So where did these come from? Because I'm looking at the first 5, I guess. It seems to me like we could just say ability to pass. Well, I guess. Okay.
Yeah,
So
maybe, I didn't want to get into like getting rid of them. Like it just seems like kind of a loaded discussion more than I think.
Yeah, it's Chief Hawk. Any insight on kind of how these originated? Do other departments list? Because they have to sign off, so that it's not just like in the corporate world you list, here's the key responsibilities. These are more like, well, I guess essential duties. Yeah.
I guess it's kind of, maybe stating the obvious to people who are looking for this type of job, but I'm assuming they, at some point, long before I ever got into the line of work, probably, or even Matt Lucas could speak to it, this must have been drawn up, and it's still on our application. I'm not sure, I can't speak to other area agencies, but it was, they put you through that physical agility test before you're hired to make sure you can do the basics. In fact, we lost a candidate several years ago, our most recent hire, because they could not perform basic, they couldn't get through the window. There's a window climb as part of a physical agility test, couldn't get up through the window and such. And so he failed that part. I guess it's just, kind of spelling out, you're going to have to do some physical activity on this job. To be my assumption, Amy, and Matt Lucas again could probably speak to it if he chose to.
Yeah, I would, there's no way to put a all-inclusive numerical list on all the things that a police officer might have to do in the course of their career. So I think probably what they did was just capture, general important things that, like the chief said, the physical part. Maybe, Brian, the thing to do is add a 16 and just add that, there's going to be additional, these are essential, but not all of the duties. But I think any candidate that's picking up this application recognizes this list for what it is, just kind of a something to say, hey, this is the kind of stuff that you're going to be doing. Just be aware that you got to be able to do it.
That's a really good point, Matt. I like thinking back to my experience in the corporate world. There's always that we tend to put percentages to the duties, and that 5 or 10% at the end is other duties as assigned. So, this is never going to be all inclusive. And I'm okay with putting, like, on number 12, I forget the verbiage you used, Brian, but suffering from mental or physical trauma or whatever tweaks. I think we could certainly tweak this, but we don't have to, like, I was just wondering kind of what purpose this serves to have them sign off on it. I do remember, by the way, the last one, when we interviewed the officers a couple of years ago, I do remember someone saying that the report writing was an issue for some officers, that they couldn't write in a clear and concise manner, or that a report that was understandable or complete or whatever. So as we get closer to determining how we want to interview these folks, maybe in addition to an oral, we ask them to submit a writing sample.
Well, that might be something. I don't think we need to get into that. And the reason for that is I do know a chief from another department, nobody present, who had an officer that was having trouble. And I remember him sitting down with that officer saying, like, your reports, like, they make me sick. They're terrible. And that officer wasn't able to continue because, I mean, they tried to help him get better at reports, but he couldn't. I think this is more you're signing off on this. So during that probationary 1-year period, the chief can go back and go, hey, these were the things you said you'd be able to do, and you're not doing them. So that's more, I think, what this part of it's for. This document, I think, is most critical for the background investigation. This is who the investigator is going to start using to dig into. The things that I would suggest adding to it, and it's just because of the day and age, is every person that they list on this application, they should put a good email address for. Because when the investigator starts reaching out, trying to contact people and can't reach them by phone because of shifts or schedules or whatever, to be able to send them an email with a, hey, I need you to fill out a character reference, and then we can talk at your convenience. But it starts the communication, gets the process going faster. And I don't know what you think about this, Chief, but the idea of a list of all social media accounts, like I want Twitter, and what's your user tag? So, and maybe it gives them a heads up.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%.
Yeah. It might give them a, hey, I better clean that up. But it should have been clean already. And if it's locked down and we can't see it because we don't have a password, good. That's at least they're paying attention to the security of the social media. So those would be my thoughts as far as what could be added to this document to make it a little bit more beneficial for the town.
Yeah, that's super helpful. I can't believe we didn't have an email address requested. That's a good catch.
So,
Okay.
Chief, do we do our own backgrounds, or is that contracted out?
We do, by and large, Matt. I think that historically this will be my first go around in it in this capacity, but typically I used to do them as a detective, and then some of the patrol guys would do, pick up, some basics, but the detectives would go out and do the neighborhoods, and, everybody would follow up with character references. I think the only part we ever farmed out was like, there's a financial aspect to it where they look at their finances and stuff and make sure they're, they're not a wreck in that regard.
Yeah, Ryan's correct. Because in the past, it was the detectives that did all the going to the doors, going to neighbors' homes. And then, like he said, they would source out the financial debt, that kind of background stuff.
So we tackle the majority of the background check, I guess, is in other words.
Yeah.
And
So that would be, I guess, Amy, if I was going to throw a question out, it would be to the people that have done the investigations. Like I've done them for our department. That's why the email stuff. But other things that the investigators might say, it'd be really helpful if this was on the application, because then I can use that to really dig in.
Yeah, that's a great point. Chief Hawk, can you ask some of the detectives to look at this and see what they might add too?
Certainly. And I think I will do that. I believe Matt probably hit the nail on the head there that, a better point of contact, these days is email and looking at that social media. I think Matt said it, Brian said it, but I'll see if there's anything else that the detective sergeant or my detective sees, glaringly, obviously missing.
Okay. And then Brian, if you want to send your tweaks to me, I can incorporate them and kind of keep the master document. Okay, sorry, looking at the time, I have a hard stop at 10:30. So we did accomplish, I think, everything on the agenda. Let me go back. Except for community engagement updates. I did send out, I think we talked about it briefly, but just wanted to say that I distributed Falco's draft or template, if you will, for the how we operate. but I'm a little bit unsure, and Falco, maybe you can clarify. We have an ordinance. This is like what sits behind the ordinance for the procedural things. Is that accurate?
Yes, there's a section in the ordinance. I don't have the ordinance in front of me. It's towards the beginning of it, that says that the commission would establish rules and regulations. Once you complete this draft, so this is like, consider the ordinance like the skeleton, and this rules and regulations would be the flesh and bone, or flesh, on the skeleton. So it gives more detailed processes in terms of the internal operations that we've been discussing over the different meetings. Once we complete this draft, then it still would be reviewed and approved by town council before it would be implemented. Pretty much all civil service commissions, personnel boards have this type of internal operating document. So it's definitely fairly standard, and it is actually provided for in the ordinance right now, that you would actually create this document.
Okay. I think it makes sense, and I don't want to necessarily ignore it. However, I also know that this group has limited time, and I want to keep the momentum going with the officer selection process, and there's a lot to do in that regard. So is there a time expectation? I mean, we haven't had one for the period that I've been involved in this. Like, I guess my question is, can we put this on the back burner for now and get through the officer selection process and then focus on this?
Yeah, I think part of why I was suggesting it was because we had discussions in terms of the sergeant oral examinations and how those things would be conducted from an internal standpoint in terms of, the scoring and the weighting and so forth. None of that is fleshed out specifically in the ordinance itself, and again, nor should it be. It's more detailed processes. That's what kind of first got me thinking that, I think I asked Bob to look for the rules and regulations that might be in place already at the town, but he said he has not seen such a document and he doesn't believe one exists. So that was the beginning of why I felt, well, we really need to get this in place. So could you continue with the hiring process definitely for the entry-level officers? Yes, I think this should not hold that up. But in terms of how it would impact, because there is an oral examination part of that as well, I think, we should start looking at those sections of it.
Got it. Okay.
And this is different from the edits to the proposed edits that are in a different document than what you just shared, right?
Yes, that's the ordinance. These would be, again, putting the flesh on that skeleton, if you will. So it's how you operate from an internal standpoint. Now, some of the language that would be in the ordinances should also appear in the rules and regulations. And I think I indicated in my email that I've included or incorporated those changes from the ordinance into this draft that I'm providing right now. But it definitely goes into much greater detail in terms of your internal operations.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that clarification. All right.
I did look at those. I mean, I thought the meeting was at 8:30, so I had enough time to look at all those.
And
I had a couple of minor things. I just wanted to make sure I was, well, a couple of minor things and one thing that was really consistent with what Matt was talking about with respect to social media stuff.
well, and I think I have a note to look at for the last meeting. I sent out general order 1.5 because we were talking about how we did the interviews and how we're going to do the next set of interviews. So I have a note to look at this as it relates to 1.5 at some point in the future. But since it's not urgent and we have like 2 minutes left, and I want to make sure we have a chance to get updates on community engagement and anything else. Maybe we could save that for later. Everyone okay with that?
That's fine.
Okay.
And
Okay,
it definitely, because of the length of the document, I guess it could be intimidating, definitely would be probably better if everyone has a chance to look at it and provide their comments in between meetings. And even if you want to send me those comments, so that I can incorporate them and just keep the document evolving, so to speak, between meetings, I think that would expedite it a great deal.
Yeah, that's fine. I can reach out to you, Falco. That's fine.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. All right, let's go to Police Department Community Engagement Updates. Chief Hawk.
So in January, I guess, I don't know, it's more for the police department, but involving the community. I put it in my monthly report to council. We're getting we are getting a chaplaincy program off the ground for the department and the staff here, should they ever need any kind of support in that regard. As you folks know, with social unrest and stuff in recent times, I want to make sure that my officers, are mentally as best as I can, have options available if they struggle with anything. So actually, we were contacted by the Temple Wohoff Shalom. It's non-denominational, so if we ever feel the need to grow it, we could certainly do that from different faiths. But the rabbi over there approached us. He's been very supportive of the police department since I think the SRT team went down and helped at the synagogue shooting a few years ago. They've really tried to stay in touch with us and support us in any way they could. So we brought the rabbi on as our first police chaplain. He's kind of in place in that regard. Not necessarily community, but kind of. Other things in January, a lot of, has been kind of still off of the not available to us, coffee with cops and such events because of, I guess, the Omicron and such. The concerns with COVID and stuff are still very real. Obviously, you guys and girls know that. One thing to note, though, we did sign up for in January. We re-upped to do the National Night Out again this year. So we registered with that organization this past month. So we're on the books with them as planning to participate this August. I believe it's the first Tuesday of the month. August 2nd, Carolyn says. So that's the tentative plan for that. Other than that, I'm looking at my board, and while it is full of projects, that might be the extent of the community engagement, at least at this time.
Did we have folks sign up for that youth? I forget what that was called.
Oh, I got to double back with those agencies. So I think by the time they gave us the heads up, we did get it advertised, but I'll check in with Lieutenant Basil, who was in charge of that. I don't believe we had anyone show up from McCandless that was interested. I don't know if it was a matter of it wasn't advertised long enough, or if it was just simply the interest wasn't there. I'll double check with the lieutenant though, and I can, either give you guys a heads up next month or even send out an email with that update.
Yeah, I was just curious. I was trying to get my son to go, and he would rather play his video games. So,
Struggles we're going to have in this line of work. Yeah. And it's showing up. Yeah. Video games are more important, I guess, for teenagers. They are.
All right. Any other business or public comments? I don't think we have public here to comment, but any other business or other updates? I just noticed there's a chat message.
It's from Brian, right?
Yes. Yeah, I agree. That's great. So follow-up question on that, Chief Hawk, that's just a volunteer thing, or are we paying him, or is he employed by us? How does that work?
It's a volunteer. It's, like I said, the rabbi came to us and me and Sergeant Egley sat down with him and thought it was a great idea. Besides, him coming in and just checking in with us, he's been in a couple times. You know, he tries to pop in, I think maybe once a month or so. There's no hard and fast rule there, just whenever he thinks it makes sense to check in with us. Maybe the officers get a chance to interact with him, feel a little more comfortable in case they ever do feel the need to reach out to him. But it's not paid. We did provide him an identification and a jacket that says police chaplain, because beyond coming and maybe speaking with officers, and confidentially at their request, he could also serve other roles. Like an example might be, maybe we need assistance with a death notification, and he might go along with us and help notify a family of a death or something like that. So there are things beyond just support for the officers. He could serve other roles for us in that regard. But certainly it's his time. He's volunteering, Amy, to answer your question.
That's great. Okay, last call. Any other comments or business? Okay, I motion to adjourn. Any seconds?
Second the motion.
Okay, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you, everyone. Next meeting, sorry, before you go, we're March 16th.
I'll send out a Zoom invite whenever it might even be today. I got to practice putting those together. So I'll send you all out a Zoom invite for next month.
Perfect. All right, thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thanks. You too. Thanks.
Darn alarm sets.